Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the English Echo podcast. I'm David, and today I've got someone very special with me, Stella. She's going to take us through some of the most common British expressions you'll hear absolutely everywhere in the UK. So whether you're planning to visit, studying British English, or just love the way Brits speak, you're in the right place, because these phrases will not only help you understand everyday conversations, but will also make your own English sound so much more natural and authentic. And by the end of today's episode, you'll feel confident using them yourself without hesitation.
Thanks so much, David. I'm really excited to be here today, and I can't wait to guide our listeners through these expressions because each one has its own unique flavor and story behind it. British English is full of personality, and understanding these phrases will not only improve your vocabulary but also help you connect better with native speakers in casual settings, work environments, and social situations. And I promise, even if you've never been to the UK, by the end of this podcast, you'll feel like a local when using these words. Let's start with cheeky, which is probably one of the most charming words you'll hear in everyday British English. Now, the funny thing is, it doesn't mean rude in the usual sense when used in phrases like cheeky pint or cheeky Nando's. Instead, it usually implies something slightly indulgent, playful, or spontaneous, almost like you're allowing yourself a little treat without overthinking it. For example, if you're at the end of a long week and you decide to stop by a pub for one quick drink on your way home, you might say, "I'm going to have a cheeky pint," and it just sounds very casual and relaxed. Or imagine a Saturday afternoon when you fancy a meal out that isn't strictly planned. You could say, "Let's grab a cheeky Nando's," which gives the impression that it's just a small, fun plan rather than a formal outing. You'll also hear it in sentences like, "I'm going to take a cheeky half-hour nap," or "I had a cheeky look at the dessert menu," and it really adds a playful, light-hearted tone to everyday conversation. The key thing to remember is that cheeky often makes ordinary actions sound spontaneous and fun, and using it correctly will make your English sound very natural, almost like a native speaker. Next up, we have fancy, and this is a word that can be confusing for learners because it has slightly different meanings depending on context. One of the most common uses is to express desire or interest. For example, when someone says, "Do you fancy a cup of tea?" they simply mean, "Would you like a cup of tea?" It's a much more casual and friendly way to offer something, and it's used everywhere, from offices to cafes to social gatherings. Another example is when someone says, "I really fancy that new jacket," meaning they like it a lot or are tempted to buy it. In British English, fancy can also be used romantically, like saying, "I think I fancy him," which means you have a crush or feel attracted to someone. Using fancy correctly makes your English sound very natural, and it's a word you'll hear multiple times a day if you're listening to casual conversations in the UK. A tip here is to pay attention to context and tone. Saying, "I fancy a coffee," in the right casual tone is perfect, but overusing it in formal settings would sound odd. "Ah, mate." If you're learning British English, this is one of those words you'll encounter almost immediately. Mate is used to refer to a friend, but it's also a casual way to address someone, even if they're not a close friend. For instance, when two people meet, one might say, "All right, mate," which is simply a friendly, "Hello, how are you?" It's incredibly common and gives the conversation a very relaxed, approachable tone. You might also hear it in sentences like, "Cheers, mate, I owe you one," or "Thanks for helping me out, mate," and it can really make your English sound much warmer and more conversational. An interesting point is that while Americans might use buddy or pal, the British use mate in so many contexts, from casual chats on the street to work colleagues joking around in the office. Using it naturally will instantly make your English sound more authentic, and it's a must-know if you want to fit in with casual British conversation. Now, knackered is a brilliant expression that you'll hear everywhere, especially after a long day at work, a heavy workout, or a busy day exploring a city. If someone says, "I'm absolutely knackered," it means they are extremely tired, more than just a little tired. It's that kind of fatigue where you feel like you need to collapse into bed immediately. For example, after a long day of sightseeing in London, you could say, "I'm knackered. I need a cup of tea and a sit down," and people will instantly understand that you're exhausted. Another example is when someone finishes a big project at work. They might come home and say, "I'm completely knackered, but it's been a productive day," and it perfectly captures that mix of tiredness and satisfaction. Knackered is informal, very British, and it really conveys emotion in a way that just saying tired cannot, so it's worth practicing and using in daily conversation. Gobsmacked is one of those wonderfully expressive British words that instantly conveys surprise or amazement. It's used when someone is completely shocked or astonished by something unexpected. For example, imagine a friend telling you, "I won the lottery." Your natural British response could be, "I'm absolutely gobsmacked." It's much more colorful than just saying, "I'm surprised," or "I can't believe it." You might also hear it in a more casual setting, like someone walking into a beautifully decorated room for the first time and saying, "I'm gobsmacked, this place looks amazing." The word itself has a playful sound to it, which makes it fun to use, and it's a great addition to your vocabulary because it instantly communicates strong emotion in a single word. Next, we have rubbish, which is another word you'll hear in so many contexts. In British English, it can mean trash or garbage, but it's also commonly used to describe something that is bad or nonsense. For instance, if you watched a film that wasn't good, a Brit might say, "That film was rubbish," which immediately tells you they didn't enjoy it. Or if someone tells an unbelievable story, you could respond, "Oh, that's rubbish." It's informal, easy to use, and very common in everyday conversation. You might also hear it in sentences like, "I've been reading some rubbish online today," or "This weather is rubbish," which adds personality and humor to casual conversations. Mastering rubbish helps you sound more natural and confident when commenting on things around you. Taking the mickey is a phrase you'll hear all the time in informal British English, and it means teasing or joking with someone in a playful way. For example, if your friend pretends they can't cook and you say, "Are you taking the mickey out of me?" you're essentially asking, "Are you joking?" It's often used among friends and in very casual settings, and it's part of that friendly, humorous style of communication that makes British English so unique. You might also hear it in sentences like, "Stop taking the mickey, I'm serious," or "He's always taking the mickey," but it's all in good fun, which shows the teasing is playful rather than hurtful. Using this phrase naturally will instantly make your conversation sound more authentic and playful. This is a simple but very common phrase in the UK. When someone says, "I'm easy," it usually means they don't mind or are flexible about a plan. For instance, if your friends ask, "Do you want pizza or pasta for dinner?" and you reply, "I'm easy," you're essentially saying, "I'm fine with either, it doesn't matter to me." It's short, casual, and very common in everyday situations, whether you're at a cafe, making plans with friends, or arranging activities at work. You might also hear it in slightly longer sentences like, "I'm easy with whatever you choose, just let me know," which shows politeness and flexibility at the same time. Practicing this phrase will make your English sound effortless and natural. Then we have bits and bobs, which is a very casual way of talking about small items, minor tasks, or little things in general. You might hear someone say, "I spent the afternoon doing bits and bobs around the house," or "I need to pick up a few bits and bobs from the shop," and it immediately conveys that they're talking about a mix of small, miscellaneous things. It's a very friendly, relaxed phrase, and it makes conversations sound very natural and native-like. You could also use it in more creative sentences like, "I've got a few bits and bobs to sort out before the weekend," or "She collects all sorts of bits and bobs for her craft projects," which shows the versatility of the phrase in casual English. And finally, blimey, which is a classic British exclamation used when someone is surprised, shocked, or impressed. For example, if a friend tells you, "I managed to finish that huge project in one day," you might respond, "Blimey, that's impressive." It's also used casually when reacting to something unexpected, like, "Blimey, look at the size of that queue," or "Blimey, it's freezing today." It's a little old-fashioned, but it's still very common in informal speech and gives your English that unmistakable British flavor. Using blimey appropriately adds color, humor, and character to your conversations, making you sound more confident and natural when expressing surprise. So those are 10 everyday British expressions that you're likely to hear everywhere, from cafes and offices to streets and homes. Remember, the key is not just to learn the words, but to listen carefully to how native speakers use them in context, including tone, timing, and expression, and then try using them yourself in conversations, texts, or even practice dialogues at home. Don't worry if it feels unfamiliar at first, just keep practicing, and soon it will feel completely natural.
Absolutely, Stella. Thank you so much for walking us through all these expressions today. I'm sure our listeners will now feel much more confident using these phrases in their daily conversations. And the next time they're chatting with friends, watching British shows, or traveling to the UK, they'll sound much more natural. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we'll see you next time on the English Echo podcast.